Welcome to Collective Soulversations. I'm Jody Jones, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this amazing journey exploring spirituality, healing, and personal growth. With over 15 years of experience as a psychic medium and energy healer, I've made it my mission to help people connect with their true selves, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. In every episode, I chat with incredible guests who bring their own unique stories and insights to the table. We dive into different tools and practices that can help support you on your path of self-discovery. So whether you're just starting out or you've been in this journey for a while, Collective Soulversations is all about creating a friendly and welcoming space for us to explore the mysteries of the soul together. So grab your favorite cup of tea, get comfy, and let's dive into this enlightening adventure together. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Collective Soulversations. I'm Jody Jones, your host, and I have a very special guest with us today. I have Darren Austin Hall in the house. Hey, Darren. How's it going?
It's doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited that you're here. We're going to talk about lots of stuff. We're going to dive in, but I want to give an intro about you first so that our listeners can really kind of get to know all of the goodies about you. So I'm going to go in and share all that stuff and then we'll get started.
Sounds
So,
great.
everybody, Darren Austin Hall is a spiritual teacher, a sound channeler, a mystical musician, author, poet, and ecstatic dance DJ facilitator. He is the creator of the Source Resonance Academy, devoted to leading sound healing training retreats, intensives, and workshops around the world to initiate others onto the path of using sacred sound as a medicine of the soul. I love that. He shares his legendary sacred sound journey concerts around the world and is a renowned recording artist. His new double album, Honor All Creation, is a concept album of sound healing, journey music, mystical folk, and ambient dance music devoted to the dawning of the new earth. It also consists of coinciding online courses that charts a deep vision quest into the secret wisdom of the earth and the great goddess, Honor All Creation, a new earth story. His new book, Love's Revolution, is an enthralling collection of writing, short stories, and poetry, which offers a captivating and provocative exploration of the burgeoning realm of sacred sexuality and the revisioning of intimate relationships as pathways of conscious partnership and embodied mysticism. It is available worldwide on Amazon. Darren shares his wisdom warrior teachings on his YouTube channel, sharing spiritual perspectives and empowering knowledge. Darren is also passionate about rectifying masculinity in a toxic world and has led many men's groups over the years. His Kings of the Heart online program takes men through a 6-week journey through the masculine archetypes of empowerment to inspire next level positive transformation in their lives. He is also the founder of the Earth Nights men's retreats. Darren also shares his Temple of the Wild ecstatic dance with cacao activations, donning his DJ Druid cap. He also shares next level shaking medicine sessions. Darren is devoted to the re enchantment of our world, restoring a sense of the magical beauty inherent to nature, reverence for Gaia, the goddess that is Earth, and stewarding a new golden age of universal truth, spiritual science, and unity consciousness. Wow. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. That was the unedited, longer version. Thank you
That
for
must be
sharing.
like when you listen to that yourself, you must be like, wow, I'm doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, Gemini sun sign through and through.
Lovely. Well, I'm glad that you're showing up and doing all of I've known you actually for years and years. And I've just, I didn't realize all of the stuff that you're doing though. So you're a busy, busy guy for sure.
Yeah, I feel just really blessed, to be alive in a time when there's such an awakening culture of spirituality on the planet. And it's just nonstop service right now. It feels amazing. The real challenge is finding the time to rest and recuperate, really.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I want our listeners to really get to know, like, I mean, that's, all of that stuff is amazing. And obviously, you're doing and creating and, like, awakening and journeying and exploring and doing all of the wonderful things. But how did Darren get here? And like, and tell us, take us back as far as you kind of feel comfortable with who Darren is, why he all of a sudden, became this spiritual guru, right? This teacher, this guide. Like, most people don't. I think that it's not, most people just do the humanness that they can do, but you're for whatever reason, your soul is pushing it, right? It's sending you out there. So tell us a little bit. Take us back in time a little bit.
Sure. So, yeah, for me, it really began. I did have a very powerful spiritual awakening when I was 22. I was at the University of Western Ontario, and I was studying an amazing program called Media Information and Technoculture. It was a new program. This is around 2002 when the internet had just really like burgeoned in the world. So there was a lot of excitement in the program about, unifying all of the world knowledge and such. And in my final year, I had this amazing professor who I really look back as my first spiritual teacher, although he was just a professor. His name was Timothy Blackmore, and he taught this amazing 400 level class called The Mechanical Flower: How Technology is Distorting Our Perceptions of Nature. And it was like a think tank of maybe 15 students doing high level learning of different texts from Henry David Thoreau, Walden, like ancient pastoral texts about nature worship, to like looking at even AI and like where is science and technology going now. And I was also doing an elective in Asian philosophy, and the final paper I wrote that year was for Timothy Blackmore's class. And I think all of the different mystical things I was studying with Buddhism, Taoism, Zen, it all just kind of collided in this essay I was writing on 2001 Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. And it was like 2 weeks of just in this crucible of, I think my essay ballooned to like 40 pages at some point. It was only supposed to be 12.
Wow.
And one night I was in the kitchen in the wee hours of the morning after just like writing and having all these epiphanies. And I remember I was getting a glass of water, and I remember just watching the water pouring out of the tap, and the moonlight was kind of shimmering through, and the water was luminous. And I just had this kind of Buddhist moment. Buddhism, there's so much about like emptying ourselves of words and concepts to get to the essence of things. And I was just looking at water and I'm like, what is this? What is water? This is like the blood of the universe. Like, my gosh. And that kind of revelation just sparked a vision inside of me. I've had a lot of visions. I'm a very visionary person. I saw this kind of hermaphroditic magician, like this god, in this mystical laboratory at the moment of creating water. And it laughed in absolute ecstatic joy of creating this incredible element. And I just felt that joy like ring through me as if I felt it as my own, as if I was participating in this divine creation. And from there, it was just like, boom, I was awakened to the divine.
Wow.
And I just became this voracious student of the mystical. And the next year after university, I worked a desk job in Toronto in a cubicle, but I was just literally just studying any free moment texts and starting to practice yoga meditation. I kind of joke that I did my master's and PhD in like 1 year in spirituality. It was
Right.
just, and then I ended up traveling. I got really interested in like going to India, finding a guru, getting really deep into Eastern mysticism. But I ended up finding my way into China as an English teacher for 3 years.
Oh,
And it was there
wow.
that I found my first, like, actual spiritual teacher, this really wild, brilliant Scottish man, actually called Dr. Andrew. And he initiated me into more, beautiful texts and practices. And then when I came back to Canada, I decided I wanted to study alternative medicine. So I started studying at this place called the Institute of Traditional Medicine in Toronto, and I did a diploma of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And this is approaching my Saturn returns when I was 30. But I was still a little confused. I've always been a very artistic person, a poet, a writer, a musician, and I just felt like that part of me, that sacred artistry, I didn't understand how to create like a professional pathway, and not to speak of even a spiritual pathway with it. And I went to see an astrologer for the first time in my life, and I now see her every year around my birthday in June. And the minute I walked in the door, if you've ever seen a good astrologer, you understand why Hippocrates, the ancient Greek founder of medicine, said, any practice of medicine without a sense of astrology is blasphemy. There's
Right.
just such a consummate understanding of the soul through the star alignments.
Yes.
And I sat down, and this astrologer, she said to me, "Do you want to be a spiritual teacher?" And I just said, "Spirituality is the love of my life. I love practicing, learning about spirituality to share and disseminate that with others to ennoble them. Sign me up." And then the second thing she said was, "You're also a sound healer," which was very interesting because I'd never heard of that word before.
Right.
Sound and
Yeah.
healing. What is that?
Yeah.
And she literally said, "Just Google it." And that Google search changed the whole trajectory of my life. There was a bunch of other things that happened, but I basically reconnected to a mystical practice of music I was doing as a child because I now kind of own this. I was born clairaudient, like I hear sounds and songs from higher dimensions. And when sound healing opened up for me, I really started to connect with things like the crystal bowls, and then this whole very natural evolution of me into mystical music began. And from there on in, it's just been, beautiful evolutions in so many different degrees.
That sounds magical. Like it really sounds like your team has you on the fast track of I don't know how you got that golden ticket. I would like to have it. So, I mean, that's beautiful, but obviously, with the light comes the dark. So, where does that come into this like beautiful journey?
Yeah. That's I'm glad you asked that because, I often tell people, because I say right now, the Earth is a mystery school, the whole planet.
Yeah.
Everyone is being initiated into so many different things in the realm of spirituality. The internet has liberated the wisdom of the ages. But, spirituality is not, the most comfortable and easy journey because it is really about evolution of the self, of the soul. And when I had this spiritual awakening when I was 22, because of what I was studying at university, media information and technoculture, I was studying like the nitty-gritty about the media matrix, about war propaganda, about the corruption in how humanity has been manipulated through the military industrial media matrix, really. And then we had 9/11, which to me, the more I investigate, 9/11 was my rabbit hole
Right.
into conspiracy culture. It
I think
was
for many,
then.
right? That was a big portal that opened for many people.
Absolutely. Same with the pandemic. These are all grand collective shadow work moments.
Yes. Yeah.
And what happened with 9/11 was I had sort of already had this idea that the government was distrustful, to a very nefarious degree. But when I saw 9/11 and started to research for myself, I realized, wow, not only are they distrustful, but they're actually um, eliminating
Mhm.
innocent human lives for
Right.
their darker agendas. And that would have put me into a rabbit hole of absolute cynicism and pessimism, which you see in a lot of conspiracy culture. There's kind of this
Right.
addiction almost to fear and the doom and the gloom, like
Well,
who's
and
got the
angry,
most.
right? That anger, that rage, it's a vessel
Right.
to feed it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have my moon in Aries, so there's always been this warrior, that wants justice in me. But I really see that because I had this coinciding spiritual awakening, I did go through a 6 month dark night of the soul around this time, where my whole sense of reality seemed to completely deconstruct. I didn't know what was real anymore. I felt I had a real sobering understanding that there is a very demented and toxic energy that's been infecting human consciousness and possessing some of our leaders. And if it wasn't for spirituality, which really awoke me to the human potential through soul evolution, to do good, to be magnanimous, great souled beings. And I was a huge studier of Gandhi. I really saw Gandhi as a living example of the teachings of such masters like Jesus,
Right.
who showed us that there are ways to resist, the forces of empire using spiritual practices like ahimsa or nonviolence. And that kind of created this North Star for me. And I came out of that 6 months really feeling, okay, you know what? Spirituality in me is more galvanized than ever because I really feel if we're up against such a powerful force of antagonism, it's really the growth of our essence, of our soul, that is the perfect antidote. And if anything, what is being primed in this initiation is to
Right.
awaken into this greater empowerment of what we really are.
Yeah. And so when you were going through that, so when you were, having your eyes opened to the darkness, to, the big picture, spirit is always calling it the big picture for me. What do you think, what components of that do you think kind of like lowered your frequency or brought you into a lower aspect of being, of exploring? What do you think the components were that created that part?
Well, what comes up for me is, ignorance in itself, not knowing something can be, incite a lot of fear. And this is why I've been very interested in this ancient tradition of gnosis, which means human beings have the natural ability to know as the gods know, as the divine knows. And if anything, I think that's really the natural evolution of humanity. We're supposed to be on this living library of Earth, the wisdom goddess herself, and we're just supposed to go through this long and exciting, riveting process of education, of bringing our souls to life in these blessed bodies. But when we are in ignorance, when we don't know something, and a lot of the matrix of the world is really built on suppression of truth, it can create fear because you don't know what is going on. You don't feel in control of your values or your belief systems. And so when I was coming into all this conspiracy knowledge and realizing all these secret things were going on in the world, I had to really realize I had to do it in small doses, or else I was
Right.
going to overwhelm and
Mm.
stress my nervous system out. Some of it's very traumatizing. I mean, when you start to realize there are negative entities in our midst, that are predating on us, I mean, that can be very scary for people. So I had to deal with just, the antidotes for me were presence. The practice of presence to me is the foundation of almost all spiritual growth and practice. Being
Right.
mindful, having control of the mind, because in this information age, we have a struggle to strike this balance that this one spiritual teacher told me between being and doing, and or being and knowing rather. We often like take all this information in through the internet, but to actually allow it to work on us, to really integrate it, takes the time to just be with the soul, to be in contemplation, to be in reflection, and to also just manage your consciousness, to know when you're spinning with these thoughts and it's creating a lot of stress and it's kind of lowering your vibration. Maybe that's the time to close the computer, close the information stream, go and sit and allow this natural process of integration that just naturally happens when you sit in meditation. I mean, the ancients, the mystics in Chinese medicine, they were all about this. When you just simply sit, nature adjusts itself into harmony. So that's very powerful. And then the other thing is prayer. Prayer became very important to me to acknowledge that we're not alone as well. Yes, there's maybe these negative entities in our midst, but there's also angelic entities. There's also gods and goddesses. We have all this support, the ancestral realm.
Right.
And to weave with that realm is very important to make a dedicated part of one's life. And so prayer became very important. And you realize through prayer, you are added onto. When you ask for these things, when you ask for this support, it happens. And the presence practice really dovetails nicely because it makes you more sensitive to those miraculous synchronicities, to some circumstances in your life where you start to acknowledge, okay, there are things now coming towards me now that I've made this ask, which can be
Right.
really re-enchanting.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would agree 100% with everything that you're saying about the awareness, right? So when we have the awareness of something, it, it almost diminishes the power that it has, which I think on the spiritual journey is important because I feel like we should all be, you know, aiming to be, you know, powerless, but on the same, vibrational frequency of that neutral zone, right? So meaning I don't have to, I don't have to ascend to be a master. I don't have to,
Right.
right? I feel like that's an important part of the journey. And I feel like for a lot of souls who are on the ascension process, they miss that part. And I think a lot of, and see if you, let me know if you agree with this, but a lot of souls get stuck in that, in the rabbit hole, in that whole cycle. And having the unknown exposed to you, it has physiological components to it that are very human but very long lasting, and we need to heal from that as well.
Absolutely. I love your point about the neutral state, because something I've learned a lot from studying things like Taoism, for example. Taoism is a very grounded form of spirituality. It's the mysticism of nature. And there's this particular symbol that probably most people know of, the yin yang symbol,
Right.
which is actually called the Taiji, the supreme ultimate symbol of nature. And this is said to be the energetic configuration that happens when you come into that neutral resting place, when you're really not doing, which is called Wu Wei in Taoism. They're all about don't do, just be. And the paradox is when you don't do and you just be, you realize something is always doing, And in
Right.
Western medicine, we call this homeostasis, which I think is a miraculous thing. When you rest homeostatically, your body and your mind, which is important to recognize in psychology, starts to integrate and harmonize. This is why we dream every night. When we dream, our unconscious is allowed to sort of defrag our hard drive from all that we've experienced in our life, which can be very fractious. So that neutral state is very important. And I find it's interesting because there is a certain maturity to recognize that because, the ascension culture, which is beautiful in its own right, but when we're too much after these upper chakra mystical experiences, and I see it a lot nowadays with the activations of plant medicine and psychedelic therapy, people are kind of chasing that experience of the mystical,
Mhm.
and they're losing sight of the fact that you can have mystical experiences in the mundanity of washing the dishes in a full
Right.
mindful practice, the sensitivities that come online. So I do feel that that neutral point needs to be really stated a lot more because a lot of spirituality is kind of being co-opted, and I think there is also an infiltration here, maybe of forces that want to sidetrack spiritual growth in humanity to get us into this like upper chakra, getting even off planet into these high mystical states. And then we forget the earth, and the earth is our
Right.
goddess, is our mother. And those grounded spiritualities, I recently posted this two-part essay on Pluto and Aquarius. And the second part, I talk about the fallen goddess mythology, the Sumerian goddess of Inanna who willingly goes to the underworld, the path of descension, which is shadow work. That's where spirituality gets into this like it's not all fun and rainbows. It's a lot
Right.
of it is confronting those fragments that you fragmented off and pulling them back in. And that takes a lot of love, a lot of patience, a lot of wisdom.
Yeah. And I feel like part of the agenda of the dark is, they give us all of this technology. They give us all of this information that, you can go and Google and, YouTube everywhere and get lost and get completely full of data and information. And it creates a different version of you vibrationally. And I think for a lot of people, they have a hard time coming out of that vibrational aspect. So, listening to somebody like yourself saying, go into neutral and following the teachings of the Tao and all of that, it's almost like they're two different worlds, right? To be able to come from somebody who's fully in their mind, fully full of information, fully getting downloaded on a daily basis of input of perception of information, and then to go, first of all, recognizing, this doesn't feel great. Right, what's my nervous system doing right now? Why is my immune system not doing what it needs to do? But then making that transition from that state of being into really like the state of our soul energy, which is very neutral, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I often say, that, I've been developing a course called The Wounds of the West. What are the wounds of Western civilization? And one of the biggest wounds is we have an epidemic of a disembodiment complex because we've been so kind of in this masculine energy of the intellect. You think of the rise of modern science in the 17th century. Rene Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am," which I
Right.
believe was one of the most misleading statements. And in a lot of my work on my blog, The Reenchantment, I've been writing a lot about AI lately because this is what I studied at university. We were tracking how modern science actually got in trauma therapy. This is called what's it called? Oh, transference. So the wounds of the Christian empire, got transferred into science. And this is a big thing that is a big blind spot in our understanding of our reality.
Yeah.
But when you look at how science has evolved since the 17th century, it is really about being in the intellect. And that's a struggle for people because when you're overly in the mind, your body just withers. It loses its sensitivity. And when you look at more of these Eastern-based understandings and indigenous understandings that were really in this beautiful rapport with nature, I think also with Tantra, there's a reason why Tantra is such an important spirituality for this age. And I'm not just speaking of like the sensationalism of sexual Tantra. I mean the broader scope of Tantra, which means to weave with all of your experiences, to truly honor all creation as a part of your reality, the good and the bad, and thus
Right.
nullify these hardened dualisms. And when you start to get into your body, and spending more time, doing body practices, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now was my first introduction to feeling your inner body awareness,
Right.
feeling that you have an energy field that's suffusing your whole body and your head and your mind. And when you feel that, you start to get more captivated to stay anchored in that. And another good way of really connecting with that is to spend time in nature. Because when you're in nature, nature is happening as a kind of grander planetary body experience. It tends to soothe that nervous system, especially when we've been overly intellectual. It brings us back to homeostasis. This is why a lot of people who live in the city, when they go out to nature, they find themselves almost feeling like completely exhausted. And that's really just
Right.
like, hey, lie on the grass and let nature just like bring you back into homeostasis because that's what it wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were taking the courses in university, so what year would that have been? Do you remember?
1998 to 2002.
Okay. So like I don't even know if I had even heard about AI back then. Like I don't think that it
Right.
was so the idea that you guys were studying that at that time is very interesting. So tell
Yes.
us what your perception is of AI now because it's everywhere
Sure.
now, right?
Hmm.
Like I
Hmm.
love the way that they do that to us. That's why it's always and maybe you can talk on this as well it's that understanding the duality on this planet because like here's stuff that the dark gives us, here's stuff that the light gives us, right? It's
Yeah.
what we kind of do with it that kind of determines what side we want to be on, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I feel really that this was an important part of my journey that I studied AI at university 20 years ago before it was on anyone's radar, really.
Yeah.
And I have to give a lot of credit to the work of David F. Noble, the late great professor at U of T. He wrote some incredible books of scientific criticism. And the book that we studied in this course was called The Religion of Technology, which I highly recommend for anyone who wants to really zone in on what I was just sharing about this transference from Christian, values into Western science, which then evolved to this kind of pinnacle moment with AI. So the interesting thing about AI is that, of course, it's like everywhere now. It's pervasive. A lot of us are using it. I use it, ChatGPT, and I've been writing a lot about AI recently because of what I study at university and what I learned. And this is the thing. At the bottom line, AI is just a technology. It's just a tool. But
Mhm.
what I've been trying to really emphasize to people is I'm more concerned about what is the consciousness behind its development because we're seeing that it's very much captured by the military industrial complex right now. And people may have seen in the last year, there's been some high level resignations of executives at the AI branch of Google and such. And sometimes these people quit and they have to sign non disclosure agreements, like they're not allowed to say anything. My intuition is telling me these are probably very brilliant minded scientists who really have a very kind of neutral sense of AI, and they're brought into these
Right.
backroom deals and they're seeing the governments
Or who have
wanting to
discovered
weaponize
things,
it.
right? Who have discovered things that,
True.
powers that be do not want them to share right now.
Exactly. And so there's that side of it. And then it was recently there was an admission by a whistleblower in the Biden administration in America who said that, the Biden administration has been really trying to control AI. They're not allowing innovation, they're keeping it amongst the intelligence agencies. They don't want people to be outsourcing and developing on their own. They want to really have control over
Yeah.
this. And that also makes me nervous. And the big thing, the big red herring on this, the big thing that really stands out as a sore thumb was when the pandemic happened, people might want to remember that we all had our governments lockstep following this idea of the Great Reset. You know, where
Right.
did that all of a sudden come from? It was like they were all parroting the same message. You can even see these very eerie YouTube clips where you see like Trudeau and
Right. They're all
Merkel,
saying
and
the exact state. Yeah.
it's like they're
Recording
all reading
statement.
the same script.
Yeah.
And The Great Reset came from Klaus Schwab. It was a book written by Klaus Schwab, very opportunistic. He just had this book all of a sudden published when the pandemic had just started about how COVID, this pandemic, can be used as this amazing opportunity to reset the world into what they were calling Agenda 2030.
Right.
And the World Economic Forum is this think tank that's literally like over controlling a lot of our governments, especially in the G8. And if you went on their website at the time, they've had to backtrack a lot of this and like kind of hide it on their website because I think they didn't realize how enlightened humanity has become. But when you went on to the Agenda 2030, they had like this big circle with all these different nodes or pies of different realms of development that this agenda was all about. There was this eerie video that they put out. You know, the number one tenet was, hey, in 2030, you will own nothing and you will be happy. You know, it's like, what? That's like communism, right? And then, but they had this one pie. This is what I want to relate to AI called transhumanism. And when you clicked on this, this is where these are the things we're studying at university. Transhumanism is this idea that humanity is somehow inherently flawed, the original sin doctrine of Christianity transferred into science, and that we need to be augmented, improved in a certain way, that nature is a mistake. It's not doing the correct job. But we, in our patriarchal hubris, all these mostly male scientists, we are the ones who are going to help improve humanity. And we're going to use cybernetics. We're going to get into the body. We're going to insert chips. We're going to make they call it the flesh machine, and they speak it in a very deplorable manner. Oh, this flesh machine, it gets sick and it's limited. Not to speak of like all the longevity practice, spirituality of people living well beyond 100 years. No, forget about that stuff. No, we don't want to
Right.
go there. You know, Francis Bacon, who created the scientific method, he famously said, let us put Mother Nature on the rack and rape her for her secrets. There's scientific method for you.
Right.
So this whole idea of transhumanism, and then you have literally these guys, and there's I can't remember his name, but the chief science officer for World Economic Forum, he's given some very like Dr. Evil-esque speeches talking about, you know, the time for free will is over. People have this concept of the soul of God. Now that doesn't exist.
Right.
And in their mind, they literally say, some of these AI gurus, human beings have to realize our time is done. What we're doing now is we're giving birth to a new species of life called Homo machinus. And this machine species is going to be the glorious destiny that we could never reach. And I extrapolate a lot on this is also like the male wound of envy around women having the power of womb to create life, something that men have this unconscious like, you know, wow, women are more powerful than us because they really create and conceive life. Well, this is the ultimate like, well, now we have this power because we're creating life, you know.
Right.
There's a lot of really distorted, wounded consciousness wrapped up in this. And that's why I've been writing and sharing a lot on it because there's a lot to tease out, but it's such a great learning moment.
And the crazy part of it is, it's the design of the way that they do these things. I can't help but feel like I'm watching like a Saturday Night Live, skit.
Yeah,
You listen to this stuff and read the books and looked into the things, and you're like, is there anybody that's really looking at this stuff and being like, yes, I want to, like, this is good. This feels right to me. Like, but the scary part is that there is. And that's where, again, like, these opportunities, and Spirit's always saying, calling them opportunities, they come up for us to be like, what's my intuition telling me on this? Is this something that I should trust and follow? Does it feel like it's coming from compassion and, has my higher self in mind? Or does it like instantly make me feel like I'm fearful and like not good enough and like, right? I need somebody to save me.
absolutely. I mean, there's a few things that you brilliantly brought up there. I mean, one, for me, intuition draws us back to the embodiment thing because intuition is a body intelligence, feeling of vibration. In
Because we're
Chinese
sensory
medicine,
beings,
exactly.
and
And in
they want to dummy down our senses, right?
exactly, 100%. I mean, the heart in Chinese medicine is known as the master of vibrations. The
Right.
heart is the center of our embodied experience. So when we're in touch with our heart, we are more sensitive. And the gut, the gut has neurons as well. We understand things on a feeling level. Now, there has been a millennia old program to persecute humanity's sensual faiths in nature. The pagans, the indigenous ways of nature, the sexual wound that we find in the story of Genesis with Adam and Eve. That's why in my book Love's Revolution, I start with a short story called The Rise of Eve. I literally try and like undo this black magic spell through that story by writing about Eve being this heroine of really initiating Adam into sensual, sacred sexuality. And when you see this persecution over thousands of years, people forget that in the West, we've killed millions of each other through persecutions from the Roman
Right.
Christian Empire, Crusades, anything that went against that idea was destroyed. And one of the easiest ways to enslave humanity is when you cut us off from our inner authority, which is our heart, our embodied intelligence. When you tell us the flesh is sinful, sex is sinful, you create this very big disconnect. And then the authority figure out there, the tyrant, shows up and says, "Aha, I have the truth. This is what I'm going to say, blah, blah, blah." And you've lost the ability to sense, is this person speaking truth or not? And they're
Right.
probably enforcing their truth with uh, military power, violence, or in our modern day with just the weaponization of the status quo, like we saw with the pandemic.
Right.
You
Yeah, and
better
just the
get your
subliminal
jab,
messages
or
constantly coming to you in
oh.
every direction from every place.
So this is an amazing gymnasium for us to strengthen our sovereignty, because
Yeah.
that's what it's really about. It's like coming back to like, hey, wait a second, I'm a Gnostic. I know truth myself. I don't need to rely on, the voices of these wounded authority figures.
Hmm.
I can go within. And even better, maybe I can find like-souled people who have done this work as well, and we can start to create truth together in beautiful debates and conversations. Truth is teamwork, as I like to say.
Yeah.
So that's very important. Coming back into the body is really about restoring true natural intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting. So I use it's called the AO scanner. Eh, I don't know if you've heard of it before, but it uses bioresonance. It uses
Oh, cool.
many different frequencies to heal the body, bring body into balance. It's this massive
Mm,
program that was actually first designed by the Russians. They needed a way to be able to check on their astronauts' health, and so they
mm,
created this technology where it could remotely, tell them everything about, every body system, every body, all of it. And so I discovered this about a year ago and started using it because I was healing some significant neurological stuff.
mm,
And it's interesting because I was playing around with this AI program the other day called Claude, and because I had heard some of the other people that use the AO software um, to create a playlist. So what it allows you to do is it'll go in, it does a scan of your body systems of everything, and then it gives you these massively generated reports where there's tons of information. And then your job then is to then go and choose the balancing frequencies to come in and heal whatever it is that's showing up out of balance. And so at the time, I get vestibular migraines, and so I had a migraine, and I was like, well, let's see. Do you think that AI could like create a playlist for me? Normally, I would use um, Spirit. I would give Spirit to tell me, or I do muscle testing if I right like checking in with myself. But at any rate, I put in all of this question to Claude, and then I put in like the hundred and so frequencies that are available and said, show me like the top 15. And so, interestingly enough, it like instantly created a playlist with all these frequencies and with like a description of to like why this would be helpful, which was like I was like, wow, like this is awesome.
mm-hmm,
And then I thought, well, let's like try this another thing. So also with the O scanner, you get like the entire materia medica of homeopathic medicine. And so for those of you that don't know what homeopathic medicine is, it's like the original medicine. It really is the original pharmaceutical, but it's based on energy. Like the remedies that you use are vibrational only. There's no elements of the actual plant or mineral or whatever it is, right? Which is mind blowing for most
Mind
people,
blowing. Power
right?
of water.
Yeah, and
Jeez.
it's it's such powerful medicine. Like it's it's very, if you've ever used it, it's very powerful. So I put in and I add all of these the homeopathic remedies, and then ask the exact same question. Show me like the top 15 of the homeopathic remedies that would be good for this. And it comes back with the answer saying, well, the condition you're talking about is very serious and you should reach out to your doctor. That we can't support any type of homeopathic medicine because it hasn't been tested scientifically.
Oh, so AI had like a bias against
Yeah.
homeopathy.
So AI was
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay, you know
Yeah.
what? The frequency stuff is okay.
Right.
But the homeopathic medicine, which we
Hmm.
don't want you, I just got this sense of like, we don't want you using homeopathic
Yeah.
medicine. Here,
Yeah.
we've got some good pharmaceuticals for you over here that will help you.
Oh, and this is why, we have to be extra careful with AI, because what I'm seeing around me is that people are really giving up their power to this thing to like
Yeah.
just manage their whole life. Like I was talking to a friend the other day who's like so into AI. He's got like the Chat GPT app so he can just talk to it, and he's like, "Oh, I can't imagine my life without this thing. I just use it all day long." And I'm like, that's where it can become dangerous because people have revealed that there are biases inherent to it because you got to
Yeah.
think like it's not a sovereign intelligence. It's being programmed.
Right.
And that's where we have to become very mindful. And, the whole political duopoly in the States, Biden versus Trump. But it was very interesting because I remember at some point people were asking ChatGPT to write, hey, write a poem about Biden, write a poem about Trump. And of course, the Trump poem was like hateful and derision and all this stuff. And then the Biden poem was like this shining example. And
That's
you just start,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
just start to see, okay, so there's this like bias going on there as well. And I mean, what you just shared about homeopathy, that is just to me alarming, that we're interfacing with still a very flawed consciousness, just like our own. And to me, that's why there's always got to be the primary resource of your own sovereign intelligence, doing your own research, feeling it for yourself, using it as a tool. It can be amazing. I use it for music production right now. I'm learning how to produce ambient music. I love having all these like very fast-tracked conversations on how to
Right.
problem solve different things in my music
Right.
software. But when it comes to other matters like spirituality, I mean, there's definitely possibilities there. I have a friend in Scotland who's been using ChatGPT to help him really expound on the Course in Miracles, which can be very esoteric for some
Right.
people, and
Yeah.
that's amazing. But I think at the end of the day, the organic intelligence that is always flowing through the divinity of our soul is always the most brilliant thing. It's always the most brilliant thing. We have to remember all AI is really, it's a collection of all of human knowledge. It's a repository. It should actually make us feel, wow, we are amazing. We have all this knowledge that's now being activated by this hyper computational tool that allows us to access all of human knowledge very quickly,
Right.
but we're still the innovators of that knowledge. We're still the ones receiving original new ideas, new innovations. And that is a channeled experience. And I wrote about this recently about how, as an artist, which we all are artists, when you receive a new idea or a new song or a new creation, when you really zero in on what's happening there, it's like you're receiving this download from this divine mind that we are a part of. And then you get to craft that, to use an example of a song or a poem. You refine it, you refine it, refine it. It's such a joyful activity. I wouldn't want to just like ChatGPT, write me a poem about
Right.
heartbreak.
Right.
Blah, how boring. Then you don't get this experience, of being
Right.
this
And
sovereign
and
creator.
that people forget that we are explorers. Souls come to this planet for exploration. That's what we do. We come to explore and we come to create. And
Hmm.
so, the interesting thing about that, the technology of the AI is that it can't create. It's not a creator, right?
Hmm.
It's a data provider. It provides data. And it's interesting when you're talking because Spirit was just showing me this. Do you remember when like Google just first came out, when Google was like a thing. It's going to be hard for people to realize. You mean Google was just never always there? But
Truly.
it wasn't, right? And when it first came out, it was like this magical, like, wow, I can just put in this question and ask Google and ask, right? And I feel like for me, quickly into this whole thing, I started to be like, well, hold on a second. Because again, it was like at the time, I think when it came out, I was just studying traditional Chinese medicine. I went to school for that as well, became an
Oh, cool.
acupuncturist. And I can remember putting things in about that and it like not coming up with the right information. And I was like, well, hold on a second.
Hmm.
And I had this awareness that like it was really, really dictating what it was telling me and like where it was very selective of the information that I was able
Mm.
to receive. And intuitively, my intuition was like, this is not a just not a source that you can trust, just, completely trust. Do you
Yep.
think that AI is like cloaked in the same kind of like but we are like, oh my God, look at this, has all the bells and whistles and who like
1000%.
yeah,
And this is the thing. They're trying to manipulate and sell us on, oh, AI is going to reach the singularity moment and be its own sovereign intelligence one day. I call BS on that. I think it's always going to be controlled by humans with an agenda.
yeah. Do
And
you think it's only by humans though? And I need to ask you this just because Spirit's giving me this
sure.
word, and this is a new word for me recently. But about archons, do you understand?
Oh, I'm a huge passionate student of the Nag Hammadi Gnostic materials, the archons. It's like one of the huge like streams of my life. So I'm very
So
deep
that's
into
good that
all
they're
of that.
so. Can the art and you can tell us what are
Yeah,
archons? Who are we?
sure. Yeah, so this is one of the weirdest stories of our collective evolution that needs to be told, and that's why I've been sharing a lot of videos on my YouTube channel and writings about the archons, because human beings need to realize that we are actually under threat by a psychic invasion of interdimensional beings that our ancient ancestors called the archons. This is what was talked about in the mystery schools. The Nag Hammadi library, which was discovered in Egypt in 1945, it's a series of fragmented texts that dates back to the mystery schools, pre-Christian ideas. And there's loads of conversations about who the archons are in there. And to me, it was like a big moment when I first studied the work of John Lamb Lash, his book Not in His Image. He's one of the great experts on the Nag Hammadi. Because, when you go into conspiracy circles, there's always that rabbit hole where you find the lizard people.
Right.
And I'd be researching all this stuff, and then boom, I go down the lizard rabbit hole. I'll be like, oh, I can't go there. I don't even know what that's about. There's these
Right.
reptilian aliens who are controlling humanity. It was scary. I was ignorant of it too. But then you study the Nag Hammadi, and they describe these demented beings called the Archons as being reptilian in nature. And I was like, oh my God, there it is. It's a historical document going back 2,000 years. Okay, there's a lot more relevance to this.
Hmm.
But the story of the Archons is very complicated, and it's very needs to be really elaborated and understood. And because they really are cosmic cousins, they were made by the goddess who has turned into the planet Mother Earth, who used to be called the star goddess Sophia, who created us, it is told in these Gnostic materials. And she actually transformed into a planet. She used to live in the galactic center, which was known as the Pleroma, and she turned into a planet to help us come into evolved, sustained evolution. So it's a great act of love for her children, her divine children, humanity. But when she fell from the Pleroma into the galactic arms, into this station in our Milky Way, she didn't know what was going to happen. And an ethereal goddess falling into like more densified matter, she ended up like inadvertently fertilizing these inorganic particles that were flinging around, and she gave life to these beings called the archons unintentionally. And so the archons, the Gnostics didn't believe in good and evil, but they believed in sanity and insanity along a spectrum. And say
Very interesting.
it's very interesting. They say because the archons were not made with the same divine intention, they have this kind of dementedness, and that dementedness shows up in egotism. One of the archons was said to believe they were like the creator of this whole galaxy, and that Lord Archon is said to be the god who shows up in all the Abrahamic traditions, like a false god, and that's why you see in like the Old Testament That God is very punitive and demented and emotional. It's very interesting. So these archons have been basically infiltrating humanity, and their chief weapon is deception. They lie, they implant us with false belief systems. And the ultimate trick the devil has ever played, right? This old adage is that then they convince us they don't even exist.
Right.
So we're literally at this point in
All
our
just make
reality.
believe.
Yeah, and their ultimate, they envy and they hate us because we're the divine children, and they're kind of these demented ones that don't have the same light as us. So they're envious of us, just like the whole story of Lucifer in the Bible. And so they're endlessly trying to take us off track of our
Mhm.
evolution and maybe even eliminate us one day. And thus you have transhumanism. And as you mentioned about artificial intelligence, very intelligently, it is just a kind of what John Lamlash calls a mimetic intelligence. It mimics our own intelligence, but it's a poor copy of it. It cannot innovate, it cannot create. That is the station of humanity. The archons cannot innovate either. They're said to just be able to replicate,
Right.
ideas, but always a copy of a copy of a copy that's of less quality, like pharmaceutical drugs, less powerful than homeopathy, which is more the essence. So these archons are basically their end game is to replace humanity, create a transhumanist species. And the last thing I'll share on this note, and this is why about 10 years ago, the first AI robot, if you remember, that was being like skirted around into the UN and given rights and all this stuff, was this female humanoid robot, and her name was Sophia,
Mhm.
which is the name of our sacred mother. So it's interesting that they're trying to expunge this whole sense of our origin from us because then we're completely manipulatable if we forget where we came from. And the
Right.
Gnostics went all the way back in ancient times and said when you encounter the archons in the astral dimension, that is their biggest deceptions. They try and tell you that they created humanity.
Right. Yeah. Just the whole mind warp, right? The whole it's
Mind
the
warping.
it's the same thing that's used down here, at the on the earth plane is the whole smoke and mirrors show, right?
Hmm.
It's interesting because when we're talking about this, so I have a feeling about in you might find this strange, and I've said this before in a couple of other podcast episodes, but as somebody who's a psychic medium, you would think I would know who the archons are, but honestly, without and I you can see I've read a million books. So none of my books, none of the teachings that I've been guided to have ever included any of that until recently. And
Hmm.
of course, if we understand, the divine timing of how everything comes into play for us, that's obviously I had to reach this level or where the spot in order to be able to bring in this information and use it for a purpose.
Yes.
And I get this feeling about because I read energy, but with the archons, there's no there's such density to them vibrationally that there's no inspiration in them. There's
Hmm.
no there's no ability for them to create or manifest on their own. So what they do is they use us as sources of light.
Mm. Hmm.
And the way spirit shows it to me is and here's the thing that we have to remind ourselves about because I, would have been in the same place going down the rabbit hole of like, oh, I don't want to talk about reptilians and I don't want to talk like that's scary. I just, I
Yeah, for
like the
sure.
rainbows and the unicorns for a while. I don't
Me
want to,
too.
right? But
Uh,
so spirit shows me for the simplicity because I can hold a lot of fear in my vessel, right? I'm an empath. I can
mm,
collectively carry a lot of collective energy. And so what they've been showing me lately is that we are to look at the archons as we do parasites,
mm-hmm.
right?
Absolute
So when we talk
bullseye.
about on a physical level, right? We
Yeah.
everybody's heard about parasites. We know we have
Yes.
viruses, bacteria, parasites living in our bodies. And spirit's showing me that's how we need to look at them because really that's how they are. So they're invasive, yes.
Mm-hmm.
They don't downplay the power that they attempt to have,
Mm-hmm.
but we also are given it's like again that duality, that yin yang in there. We're given all of the tools to be able to rise above that stuff.
Yes.
And it
100%.
and for you, I love the work that you do because and then you can talk to us about this because when we break things down into like the simplest of everything, It breaks down to everything having a frequency,
Hmm.
right? Everything is emitting a frequency. And so if we are in resonance with a specific frequency, then it can take us over and it can use us, right? But if we know how to rise above in frequency, because again, the archons feeling to me very dense,
Hmm.
they're very dense beings. We are not, as a soul, we're not, but as a human, we are, which is,
Hmm.
it's like we get to play the undercover cop in the dark world because we have,
Yes.
right? We have that density, but we also have the lightness in us, which is very, very strong. And so I feel like that is, having all of the tools that you talk about, that's how we can like rise above that stuff and be like, okay, so I know that they exist. Yes, maybe some days they're trying to drive me insane and they're trying to make me feel like everything is bad. But again, I go back to that stillness. I go back to that neutral zone. I go back to because that other stuff doesn't exist there, right?
Yeah, wow, you raised so many great points. I mean, firstly, when it comes to the archons, we shouldn't have fear. You know, I years ago, when I was first early on my spiritual journey, I took a course in astral traveling in Toronto by a Gnostic society. It's a modern organization. And I remember when we were going into these meditations to get into the astral dimension, our teacher would give us these mantras. There was one, it was apparently an Egyptian mystery school mantra, and it was to basically dispel the demonic. Because he said, once you get to the astral realm, you realize the demonic is running that show. There's a reason why we've been kept out of our mystical practices and persecuted for so long, because they wanted to monopolize that world of thought forms, that more metaphysical world, so they can run rampant on there. Because the astral realm is like the rain that comes down into this realm. So if it's all polluted, then this whole realm is polluted. So, but he said when you learn these mantras, the archons or demons, they just get dispelled. They run away with fear, or they get dissolved, and then you realize they're just kind of like mosquitoes. They're just these like kind of troublemakers,
Yeah.
and there's nothing to fear. But they're apparently shapeshifters, so they can take on these very fearsome shapes. And so we have to be very, mindful of that and very much holding to our truth. And this is why it all dovetails to me. It all circles back to presence. One of my favorite, expositions on healing ourselves from the parasites, the psychic parasites. I'm so glad you said that because in Carlos Castaneda's books, which
Mm.
is based on kind of like Aztec or Mexican shamanism, his teacher Don Juan talks about these predators who are very much like the archons. They're called the flying ones,
Right.
and they exist in this different dimension. And he says they're parasites. They feed on our energy. And most people, he said, most human beings are so ignorant to this and they're just stuck in their heads. And if you look at their energy field, all of their energy's up here. And the
Mm-hmm.
archons are just feeding on all this energy.
Yes.
But the moment someone comes into presence of the body, this energy field starts to slowly trickle down and move down. And the more light we have, the more the archons can't feed on us.
Right.
And you get to the point where your whole body is fully in your field of present moment awareness. And then you simply disappear from view from the
Right.
archons. It's very
Right.
profound. There's also a lot of beautiful esoteric Gnostic teachings about sacred sexuality and how the sexual force between two lovers, when it's amplified, it creates a field of energy around the two auras intermingled to create a protective field called the Nymphian. And we
Right.
also
Right.
disappear from view from the
Right.
archons.
The
So
unity of the
there's
frequencies, right? Coming together. Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll share on this is in the Nag Hammadi materials, these ancient Gnostic mystery school materials, there is a prophecy therein. Some call it the Gaia Awakening prophecy. One of the songs on my album Honor All Creation and the course that I created for it, New Earth Story, I talk about this prophecy because it's very important for us to understand what's happening right now on our planet. And in this prophecy, the goddess Sophia basically confronts this false god, Lord Archon. And she basically says, look, you're going to have a couple thousand years of tyranny over humanity, my divine children. But at a certain point, I'm going to wake up in my dreaming. She actually says that we are alive in this world. It's her dreaming. But she's kind of like unconsciously dreaming. You can imagine this brilliant goddess, and when she dreams, this whole world comes into play.
I love
She's
that.
now becoming lucid in her dream. She's becoming an active agent to help us awaken. And she says, when we get awakened, we are going to rise above this matrix of conditioned ignorance and manipulation so quickly that in just a few generations we won't even have a second thought about the archons because we're going to be in this whole other realm of building this incredible golden age enlightened culture. And I find that incredibly hopeful and beautiful,
Inspiring, absolutely. And that's
inspiring. Yeah.
right, absolutely. So let me ask you this. So just because as somebody who's energetically sensitive, who's an empath, who's a transmuter of energies, for a long time I've been following the space weather, the solar flares, the geostorms, the
Hmm.
Schumann resonance, which is the actual scientific measurement of the Earth's core. I refer to it, spirit refers to it as Mother Gaia's heartbeat, right? The center
Mm.
of the vibration. So let me ask you this and feel into this for us. It's funny because, just a couple of years ago, we would see recordings of what we call Schumann spikes when that resonance, when that frequency would rise up to sometimes like over 100 hertz. Like,
Mm.
so, right? And so 7.8 is supposed to be the base frequency, right, for her heartbeat. And so imagine it jumping up to over 100 hertz, right? Having the Schumann spikes. And then for the past probably year, I'm going to say, maybe not quite a year, we haven't seen anything like that at all. Like it's been lower than the base. It's been like sometimes hertz for a very, like, for a few days at a time, a week at a time. It doesn't have any fluctuation. What does your intuition tell you about that? Is about with all of that going on?
Well, I think we're perhaps in a beautiful repose period,
Yeah.
but I think it's going to start getting very active again, I would say, I would suggest. The next few years are said to be very intense. I mean, we just entered into Pluto and Aquarius for the next 20 years. Pluto is the most transformational energy we're going to see on the planet.
Right.
Um, but I will say, yeah, I think we've gone through some significant galactic upgrades. This is the Mayan people were brilliant with their galactic calendar. They understood that, the whole cosmos is basically a frequency organism. And one of the ways that consciousness is activated through these frequencies is through the suns. The suns apparently have a holy alliance of suns. And the great central sun of each galaxy apparently primes the frequency that all the other suns then transmit to their solar systems. And the Mayans literally were able to somehow metaphysically track the exact moment that a new wave of galactic activation would start. And 2012 was not the end of the Mayan calendar, it was the end of the eighth wave of galactic consciousness and the beginning of the ninth wave, which is said to be unity consciousness. And that's why since 2012 till about now, there's just been so much fluctuation with the frequencies and such. But my intuition tells me that we're now just in a little, I would say, a little bit of a lull. And those are moments when we can rest, and really be in repose and integration. But it is really about building our, and I love this word, capaciousness or our capacity to hold these energies. Because as things ramp up on the planet, our nervous systems, which, in Chinese medicine, my mentor Lonnie Jarrett, he broke down that the Tao is called nerves, shenjing, which are wires that conduct spirit. We are
Wow.
literally
I don't think
these.
I've ever heard that. I
Isn't that
love that.
cool? Yeah. So your nervous system is literally like this electric, conduit system that's helping your soul be completely channeled through the body, through the mystical biological vessel of the human of the physical vessel. And as these upgrades are happening, as these energetic fluctuations are happening, our circuitry can get blown if we aren't
Hmm.
doing the right practices, if we aren't keeping the channel pure and clean. I look at the Holy Grail saga, which I'm a huge student of. In my next book, I'm writing about the Arthurian saga. And the Holy Grail, I think it was Galahad that was the first knight to drink the Grail, and he drank it and immediately became enlightened, saw all this light, the world of Sophia, the world soul, and died in
Right.
bliss because he didn't have the capacity.
Right.
I
I
think
feel like that's where
yeah.
so it was a couple of years ago. had been on the spiritual journey for a very, very long time, doing tons of healing, tons of, working with clients on all levels, and then just crashed. Like, just, right? Like, they,
In
like,
there.
almost completely taken out. So that makes total sense about, yeah, absolutely.
And that's why that neutral space, like, look, it's an amazing, it is, I like to say, it is the divine time. We're in the time of holy shift. And there's so much knowledge, there's so many trainings. I mean, you can just upgrade yourself so quickly.
Right.
But the spiritual evolutionary path is a slow path. There's no
Right.
shortcuts
Right.
because you get the insights, you get the revelations, and then you have to live it. And that process of bringing it into a lived experience takes time. It's about developing ethics, even a sense of morality, of instilling right behavior in your life, realizing that my physical vessel is finite. I don't want to squander this. So we have to work with nature to have longevity practices that we can live in vitality, our whole life, so we can give our gift it the best way that we can. Um, but if someone drinks ayahuasca or does too many psychedelics, I mean, you will blow your circuits. And I've seen
Right.
that time and time again.
Yeah.
There's no point in rushing this journey.
Yeah. And, it's interesting being a psychic medium, in the beginning of when I started to receive my gifts and abilities to do stuff, I, of course, studied with a ton of teachers and read a ton of studies about, the beginnings of medium psychics. And historically, they don't live very long.
Okay,
This is,
right.
and the idea is that, as somebody who has the ability to channel spirit and do the work we do, we have to have this ability to hold a massive amount of light.
Hmm.
But it's also about that everything you've been talking about. It's that bringing it into balance, incorporating it with the human vessel, having to take care of the human vessel because it is our vehicle that we are exploring through. So I love the when you were doing the description of the mother goddess and in the dream state and going into that's when they brought in the Schumann resonance right now. They're just lighting me up with this about this right
Mm,
now. So I feel like and you said it that we're in kind of like that kind of dreamy sleepy recovery phase right now. I feel like that's where her energy is, like she's like recovering almost from like massive amounts of upgrades and surgeries and like, right, and
yeah.
she's in this recovery stage. And so many of us who are, I think they call us like some of us the frontline workers who are very,
Hmm.
very connected to that.
Mm,
We also are feeling that in our body. It's like we're feeling that need to have that, integrating with all of these energies that are coming in.
yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like so. Do you have the awareness? Like a lot of us have been receiving a lot of downloads, especially in the dream state. Right? It's
Mhm.
easier for us to receive the light in the dream state because of course when we're in the waking state our mind is active and blocking.
Yes.
And how would you, so if somebody's going through, the and everybody's using the word ascension, I don't know if it's the exact wording for us to be using, but people seem to understand it. If somebody's going through stuff right now that they don't quite understand or it's not making them feel great or they're in this, what's your like best advice for somebody?
Going to nature never fails. Never fails. Unplugging. If you live in a city, finding a park, just going to nature and doing the Wu Wei. Do nothing. Sit, lie on the grass, hug a tree, meditate with a tree. Just allowing yourself to make time for timelessness, as I like to say.
Yeah.
Getting out of the clock time, getting into that, as the Greeks called it, there's chronos, clock time, and then there's kairos, and that's divine time. Nature's on divine time.
Right.
You don't go into nature and like, the the chickens or the horse is like, oh, it's 4 p.m. I better go here or whatever. I mean, there's certain, they go to sleep at a certain age,
But
but
there's no hurry, there's no like rush.
there's no hurry. And when especially if you have the opportunity to go hiking in a forest or in a mountain, because when you're in nature, you're no longer surrounded by human constructs. You know, you walk around the city, all you're seeing is human constructs, human egotistical constructs. Nothing bad with that. We've built marvelous things. But when you get out into nature, you're like, whoa, wait a second, we didn't create any of this.
Right.
And that does something on a
Yeah.
very deep level. And just all, they're realizing so much about eco spirituality, about the
Right.
pheromones that trees give off,
Yeah, it's very
help
humbling,
to,
right?
oh, it's humbling and just healing, it just, you start to come into this resonance, with the frequencies of nature, which are slower, more restorative. And, as one of my indigenous elders, the great Dave Christian Jr., Anishinaabe elder who I did my vision quest with, after we did this 3-day vision quest in the wild of Manitoba, I mean, we were all so rocked because we did get visions. We got direct teachings from Mother Earth and spirit animals. It was like, whoa, my God, no wonder we're all so insane because we're not
Right.
connecting with
Right.
the wisdom goddess every day. And we asked Dave, like, how can we, keep this up? And he just said, every single day you make sure you spend time in nature. Every single day. It's
Yeah.
that important. When
Yeah.
you really start to realize what happens to you in nature and you're sensitive to the fact that you start to really go into this homeostasis, this healing of mind, body, and soul, it becomes so essential.
Yeah. And the most empowering thing about that simplicity is that you don't need to rely on anybody to do it for you. You don't need to
Yeah,
buy it. You don't need to find it. You don't just open up your door and go outside, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. And that's
All we
part
need
of
is
that.
her.
Yeah.
She is the savior.
Yep, absolutely. And that's part of that understanding that the programming for us is like this: in order to heal, you have to jump through all of these hurdles and you have to go and see this person and you have to do all that.
Hmm.
But literally opening up your door and going outside and hugging the tree or sitting underneath the tree or sitting in the grass is
Hmm.
powerful medicine.
Mind-blowingly powerful. It's subtle, but it can also be very potent and unsubtle. I've had incredible visionary experiences in nature that have just blown my friggin' mind.
Yeah.
We need, this is what the indigenous peoples were really trying to tell all of us, and we all have indigenous roots wherever we're from, is that, the earth is the most primary thing because it's not just a planet where we have to share resources. The eco-spiritual dimension is those resources represent her wisdom body. She's our teacher.
Hmm.
She is the one, who's teaching us all this stuff. That's why all the greats like Leonardo da Vinci, he was left-handed at the time. That was considered, he was like a bit of of non-intelligent. He
Right.
didn't go to school. He just spent time in nature,
Right.
understanding, the great yogis who wrote the Vedic, the Rig Veda, the Upanishads, they were just the forest-dwelling sages. The
Yeah.
Taoists, they were all just like sitting in nature. When
Yeah.
Buddhism, when Buddha had his enlightenment under the banyan tree and Mara,
Right.
the devil of Buddhism was like, his final test to him was like, well, there's no one else here, so who's to say this whole enlightenment thing isn't just a fancy of your own mind? And
Right.
Buddha touched the ground and says, she is my witness. It's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah. That's lovely. I love that. So I definitely want you to come back on the show so that we
I would
can.
love that.
I've
Yeah, it's
enjoyed
been
this
great.
journey so much, and we
Ditto.
didn't even really get into any of your music stuff or any of your other
Oh, I
stuff.
know. Yeah, all good.
So we want to have you back and do that. So if, and I'll put all of your links, of course, into all of the places we're going to share this.
Wondrous, wondrous.
And if people want to get a hold of you, what's the easiest way for them to reach out and see where you are and what you're doing, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'm very active on Instagram for better or for worse at Darren Austin Hall. And then I have a newsletter called The Druid that I send out twice a month on every new and full moon. So
Oh, I
that's
need to
another
sign
way.
up for that. I want to.
Yeah, and then I have a Substack blog called The Reenchantment, where I write a lot of articles. And then my YouTube channel, I share a lot of different sound healing musics, my Wisdom Warrior chats. My book, Love's Revolution, that you mentioned at the beginning, is on Amazon.
Yeah,
And
I
I
will
have
definitely
tons
be
of
ordering
music.
that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear how you enjoy that. And then I have loads of music on Spotify, Apple Music, and different things. And um, And my new website will be coming soon. And at the end of this year, my Source Resonance Sound Healing Academy online will be launched.
Oh,
And I'll have
wow.
a membership program called Vibration Nation, where I'll be sharing bi-weekly uh, sonic voice mysticism classes and my new moon vibrations, sound channelings, and astro wisdoms that'll happen
Oh, I
as well.
love this. This is so exciting. I'm so excited that you're like
Oh,
sending
good. Yeah,
all
me
this
too.
light out to everybody. I love it so much.
Yes, 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 me too. Well, it's been a great joy to be with you here today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I've loved every moment of it, and I look forward to the next time that we can co-create again together.
Me too. I look
Okay.
forward to it.
Thanks everybody for listening, and make sure that you check out Darren because I'm telling you there's magic there. There's lots of magic
Ah,
there.
thanks, Jody.
Thanks everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Collective Soulversations podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and we hope that you found our chat both inspiring and thought provoking. Your support means everything to us, and we're excited to keep this journey going with you. So make sure that you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave us a review and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback helps us grow and connect with more wonderful listeners like you. Until next time, stay curious and keep those soulversations flowing.